That's toxic. Oh, let's talk about real world examples of toxic workplaces because we all know everybody's got secrets and they're actually happening, but they're not very public about it. So, no problem. But here's the thing, there are dozens and dozens of public examples of toxic workplaces, many of which have wound up in court, hence the reason for being public, right? So let's get into it. The examples I'm going to share with you now illustrate how toxic workplace cultures exist even in the highest levels of organizations and enterprises that you think, yeah, they got all their act going together. They don't have problems. They've got HR, they've got training, but they've got problems. And it'll also show you that all of the examples I'm sharing, that toxicity happens in every industry. It's not exclusive to whichever one you think is cutthroat. You may think like the fashion industry, right? Where everybody's just trying to chop each other up to get ahead, but no, it's in every industry. So let's talk about this and show you some examples of how there needs to be a much, much bigger effort at all levels of an organization to avoid those problems that come with toxic workplaces. And so you want to see leaders taking their organizations to a place of transparency, right? Accountability and respect for employees' rights and well-being. Imagine that, right? There's a concept. So here's a company you all know very, very well. When you think of ride sharing, what do you think of? Of course, you think of Uber. Well, a few years ago, back in 2017, actually, so more than a few years ago, Uber faced significant backlash because they had all these allegations that surfaced that they had a toxic workplace culture, right? Reports emerged in lawsuits about sexual harassment, discrimination, and a generally hostile environment. So what happened? Well, the CEO, Travis Kalanick, he was essentially forced into a resignation. And then there were a number of internal investigations. After that, oh, big surprise. There were all new policies, new employee handbooks and guidelines, and tons of reforms within the company. The rideshare pioneer also then fired 20 employees after one of those internal investigations when they heard claims about inappropriate workplace behavior, right? A lot of this stuff and all that kind of thing going on. They also were extremely criticized for their treatment of their drivers and contracts. All kinds of reports came forward saying low pay, lack of benefits, inadequate support for drivers, which led to protests and legal challenges against the company. So basically, that was a hot mess. Have they got it figured out since then? Yeah, they've made a lot of changes, right? They did the work, and that's what it takes. Okay, here's another example that some of you folks may watch on a daily basis with the daily news. Fox News. There were several high-profile sexual harassment allegations against very prominent figures at Fox News, including the former CEO, right, Roger Ailes, anchor Bill O'Reilly. Oh my goodness, all kinds of stuff came out of that dirty laundry airing, and it highlighted a toxic workplace culture within the entire organization. More than 24 women, actually almost 30, including anchor Gretchen Carlson, came forward to press charges for sexual harassment. The cases resulted in lawsuits, settlements, and a public reckoning with the network's corporate culture. Right? This stuff matters. Here's another company that I guarantee every single one of you not only know, you probably use daily and stuff arrives on your doorstep, right? Amazon. Reports of harsh working conditions, long hours, intense pressure to meet targets, deliveries made in a day, typically 600 to 700 per driver per day, lots of surveillance of employees. So all of this has shed light on the workplace culture at Amazon fulfillment centers. Not pretty. And let's talk about the countless OSHA violations for safety. All these allegations sparked debates about labor practices and worker rights in the technology industry because, of course, Amazon's one of the largest employers in the country. They were also, not cool, accused of shortchanging workers on their paychecks. See, it happens at every level. Here's another example. Wells Fargo Bank, banking giant. Back in 2016, it was revealed that employees opened millions, like millions with an M, of unauthorized accounts, i.e. fake accounts so they could meet aggressive sales targets. The scandal exposed a toxic sales-driven culture internally, which prioritized profits over consumer well-being, not to mention ethical conduct. Ultimately, the financial firm paid, are you ready for it? 1 to 3 billion, that's a B, in civil and criminal penalties after being under a 5-year watch through a legal consent decree. Here we go. Now, let's talk about the poster child for the Me Too movement, right? Harvey Weinstein. So the Weinstein Company. Widespread attention came to the toxic workplace culture in Hollywood with all kinds of allegations of sexual harassment and assault, ultimately charging the film producer Harvey Weinstein. The revelations prompted a wave of disclosures across the entertainment industry and sparked conversations about power dynamics and abuse in the workplace. Now, let's talk about a very famous car company, Tesla, right? Woohoo! The electric company led by Elon Musk. They've got all kinds of criticism, left, right, and center about workplace culture, reports of long hours, people sleeping in the freaking office in a sleeping bag, and people are applauding that culture and saying, wow, we love your work ethic. No. Not to mention all kinds of safety concerns right at the manufacturing plants. Employees described a culture of fear and intimidation. That's toxic, with allegations of retaliation against those who spoke out about safety issues. That's not cool. You have got to keep your workers safe. In 2022, the California Department of Fair Employment and Housing opened a lawsuit over racial discrimination and harassment. So yeah, Tesla's pretty much checking all the boxes for toxic workplace. Okay, here's another news example. ABC News. All kinds of allegations of sexual harassment against Today Show anchor Matt Lauer, among others. NBC News came under fierce scrutiny for its handling of workplace misconduct. The network also faced criticism for its lack of transparency and accountability in addressing harassment claims. That's one thing. If you've got all of these tools and processes in place to be able to report and receive reports of sexual harassment, you have to be able to protect the employees against retaliation and take action. So anyway, ultimately what happened? All kinds of reform within the organization. Here's another example. Home of the Golden Arches. Of course, McDonald's. In 2019, McDonald's employees actually staged walkouts all over the country, filing lawsuit after lawsuit, alleging a pervasive culture of sexual harassment in the restaurants. The complaints highlighted issues of groping, lewd comments, and retaliation against employees who reported misconduct. The cases prompted calls for much, much stronger protections for workers and reforms across the entire fast food industry. Millions of lawsuits were ultimately settled. Here's another big company, right? When you think of big, enterprise big, you think of Boeing. Aerospace pioneering company, just absolutely huge globally. In fact, they've made the globe accessible through their amazing airplanes. But there were 2 deadly crashes with their 737 MAX aircraft, which raised all kinds of questions about safety practices and corporate culture. Here's what they found out. Engineering ethics were not as sky high as their product. Reports emerged of pressure to cut costs to meet aggressive deadlines, which led to concerns about the prioritization of profits over safety within the organization. And we've all seen bolts missing, this kind of thing, doors flying off, right? So you cannot compromise safety, public safety, or the safety of the workers who are building these amazing products. One more news station in the news, right? Everybody's in there. So I guess we're kind of getting the picture that maybe news stations are toxic. CBS, this broadcasting company, faced all kinds of allegations, also sexual harassment, there's a theme here, and misconduct by prominent figures, including former CEO Les Moonves. Reports revealed a culture of harassment and retaliation within the organization, which led to all kinds of public outcry, more investigations, lawsuits, blah, blah. Here's a company that we all wear on our feet, right? Nike, just do it. This sportswear giant came under intense scrutiny following reports of a toxic workplace culture characterized by, wait for it, sexism, harassment, Discrimination against women. Former employees spoke out about a pervasive boys' club and a pervasive lack of opportunities for women to advance within the company. Well, guess what? Right? Reforms happened as they needed to. Here's another couple more examples. WeWork. Oh, everybody loved CEO Adam Newman. He had this amazing charisma. He drew people in. WeWork was a culture. It wasn't just buildings. It was something different, something phenomenal, something almost cult-like. But once they approached their IPO and ultimately failed, all kinds of reports came forward, right? The worms came out of the woodwork and talked about a toxic work environment. It was characterized by his erratic behavior, nepotism, and a culture of excess. So it happens to everyone. One more example. Actually, I'll give you two more. Victoria's Secret, right? We love the angels, but there was nothing angelic about the workplace. In fact, many described it ironically as hell. The lingerie retail giant faced allegations of fostering a toxic workplace that perpetuated misogyny, right? And body shaming. Oh my goodness, I don't think those angels eat. How are they body shamed? All kinds of reports came forward revealing instances of sexual harassment, discrimination, and bullying, which prompted calls for accountability and reform. As we've heard lately, what's the word on the street is that Victoria's Secret is troubled with respect to some things, but it doesn't seem to be a hellish workplace, at least not with what the word's leaking out. One more example. Here we go. The Dallas Mavericks. Professional basketball team in the NBA, they had all kinds of allegations of a toxic workplace after a 2018 Sports Illustrated expose. The report detailed numerous instances of sexual harassment, misconduct, and inappropriate behavior within the Mavericks organization, particularly within the team's front office. After the report surfaced, the Mavericks conducted their own internal investigation, and they found 5,000 pages plus worth of emails, texts, all kinds of stuff. And from there, the team implemented several changes to address those issues and to try to create a more inclusive and respectful workplace environment. So, of course, they changed the leadership around, they changed policies, and they changed their procedures. The NBA didn't let this go down lightly. They conducted their own investigation, and then they exposed a huge statement, right? They published it expressing grave concern over the findings and announced that it would closely monitor the Mavericks' progress in implementing the recommended changes. Ultimately, the Mavericks settled with the NBA, paying a $10 million fine, which is one of the largest in NBA history, so it's not that small, and it reflected the seriousness of the allegations. So overall, what you've heard is that all of these examples, once they become public, reform happens. But what about all those companies and organizations that you all work at where you're not getting anything publicly exposed? And so you've got to fight it one-on-one, internally in the trenches, and you're not getting that lift of public exposure to drive change. Right? There's a lot of toxicity that's happening. All of these examples highlight how urgently change is needed. We have to create workplaces that foster employee well-being and a culture of respect and accountability. These high-profile tales, really, what do? Well, they serve as cautionary tales, and they remind us of the far-reaching consequences of toxic work environments. So we've heard about the public stuff and the outcomes and the fines and all of that and reform, but what really happens? We don't hear about that. The impact on employee health, the decline in productivity, the impact on company reputation. Organizations need to take proactive measures to address and prevent toxicity. They need to implement clear and comprehensive policies, and they need to provide resources for support and reporting that blocks retaliation so that there is truly a culture of open communication and accountability. Here's another thing that these examples all underscore: the importance of leadership in shaping that organizational culture. Leaders must lead by example. They must demonstrate a commitment to ethical behavior, to transparency, and inclusivity. Full stop. And they must be willing to listen to their employee concerns and then address them, and not waiting forever, kicking it under the rug or any of that. They need to take swift, and decisive action whenever necessary. You can't hide behind, well, he or they is one of our star employers or employees, I mean, so, well, we're just going to kind of let it slide a bit. What kind of example does that set? That's the wrong example. By prioritizing employee well-being and cultivating a positive work environment, organizations can not only mitigate the risks associated with toxicity, but foster a more engaged, more motivated, and, wait for it, successful workforce.